Welcome one and all to yet another ice cool, refreshing Kings of War battle report on this incredibly hot day. So we have here Goblins versus Ogres at 1000 points in the Dominate scenario. So as you can see, the table has been sliced down with the skillful addition of some masking tape there, so it is now a 4x4 table for 1000 points, and the two forces are lined up. You can see the center point of the table is marked with a token there to show where the exact center point is, and of course for the Dominate scenario you need to have the majority of your unit within 12 inches of that point to score your unit strength and add that to the total. Now the unit strength for the Goblin side I believe is maybe one higher than the Ogre side here. So let's go through the lists, shall we? On the Goblin force, we have a troop of Fleabag Rider Sniffs, we have the Mincer, then we have the first of the Troll Hordes there. This one has no particular upgrades. As we continue to the left, we have the other two Troll Hordes. The one in the centre has no upgrades either, and the one on the left has the Dwarven Ale. Behind them, we have the War Trombone, we have a Flaget with the Diadem of Dragonkind, and over on the left flank, we have another troop of Fleabag Rider Sniffs. So that's what you get for 1000 points. On the Ogre side, we have a Red Goblin Bigot, who's going to be trying to cause some havoc. We have a Boomer Sergeant, a horde of Boomers, and I believe they are elite. Then in the middle, we have some Berserker Braves, and we have some Warriors. And they have some upgrades as well. I think the Berserker Braves are perhaps vicious, and the Warriors may well have the Dwarven Ale there to give them headstrong. And behind them we have a Standard Bearer, and he has the Banner of the Griffin, I think. And that's it. So not many units there, and heading straight into turn one. So the Goblins have elected to go first. I thought with it being Dominate, I might as well try and make up a little bit of ground towards the centre, because there may come a point that I don't want to advance particularly fast. I don't want to get to within range of those deadly breath attacks. The Boomers and the Boomer Sergeant are certainly capable of killing off some of my units. So I'd rather get to move now and just make up a bit of ground before they can put the pressure on me by moving forward, forcing me to move into their charge range, when really I wouldn't like to, but I have to because the scenario dictates that. I've got to be moving forward. Now you can see that I've got the Mincer more on the flank. This is something I'm thinking about more often. Often I'll put the Mincer behind some of my other units as backup to kind of give a second hit after the combat's over, the same way I would use a War Trombone often. But I find that the Mincer is often, if you're not against something that'll shoot your Mincer off in one go, which certain units are definitely capable of it, then putting it on the front line isn't necessarily a bad idea. And the way I've got it positioned there at the end of turn one, I'm looking to possibly get a flank on something at some point, sticking it slightly out to the side compared to how I usually have it, and hoping to get the extra attacks out of a possible flank approach with it. And if you're going to be on the flank like that, though, you're going to have to tilt it inwards or keep it behind other units just to make sure that it's not getting its flank shot or charged by anything, where it's a bit soft on the sides, but its juicy defense at the front can help it against certain things. Its nerve isn't very high, though, so you only need to do a couple of damage to really give yourself a good chance of wavering the old Mincer. Anyway, I've got my Flaget on the left there, who's keeping his Inspiring spread out a bit. I don't think the unit of Sniffs there are in too much danger. The Red Goblin Bigot does have a bow, so he's the only thing that could attack them next turn. Everything is staying out of range of the breath attacks for now. And I've just sent one unit further forward than the rest on its own. That's going to be the one I'm going to engage with first with the enemy, and then try and counter off the back of that. So, and you can see that a little bit of damage is plinked onto the Boomers with my shooting, but not a whole lot. And turn one for the Ogres now. So you can see that they've got marked out my charge ranges there with some dice, so they're not advancing up to that point yet. They're quite happy to sit back and not be charged. The only unit they're not worried about is the one unit of trolls on the right there. So one unit of trolls isn't going to kill either of those units in one go, most likely. So they're quite happy to accept the charge there, and we'll see if I'm quite happy to deliver a charge. Over on this side, there's a little bit of damage plinked onto the sniffs from the bigot bow, but that's about it. And that's how we're looking. So a little bit of a standoff, but there are options. The next turn, I am going to be able to charge. You can see that on the right, the Ogre Standard Bearer has turned to face where those sniffs could potentially end up. That's something you've got to be very careful of, especially with Ogres. They don't have a lot of maneuverability, especially since the bigot is on the other side, and all the breath attacks are also on that side. So making sure that there's nowhere for a fast, nimble, ranged unit to just dance around you is a good idea. Turn 2 for the Goblins. Oh, by the way, there's only half an hour on the clock each for this game, in case you're wondering. So this picture would have been taken at the end of my turn 2. So that's how much time I've got left there. So I decide I am going to throw these trolls in, get the first hit in, and push everything else up so that I've got charge options afterwards. And if my opponent would like to double charge this unit, that's fine, because that's going to bring the Berserker Braves into range for me to charge them with other units, and my Mincer will also be able to get into play. You can see I only do 3 damage in this combat, so that's a bit disappointing, but I wasn't going to kill them anyway. I'm relying on the next wave to do that. Got these guys in cover because there's potential for them to be breath attacked next time. So I've got the diadem there, and my sniffs, and combined they managed to waver the red goblin bigot, which is handy because he could have been annoying for blocking or charging something to disrupt it. So you can see I've got the Mincer up on the hill there. So it's very high up at the moment. Certain units would be able to see it, but I don't know whether charging it would be a good option for anyone there, because the Ogre Warriors, they're not so sure about their chances to take out those trolls in one go, I think, and they don't have another charge target. So the Berserker Braves have to decide whether they go for another unit and risk not killing anything and have me just multiple charge them afterwards, or guarantee killing that unit of trolls, which is what I'm assuming my opponent will do here, which will then allow me to lay in some juicy charges following that. I've got the trolls at the bottom near the trees, and I've also got the Mincer primed, ready to go. We'll see though. Okay, turn 2 for the Ogres, and they do throw in the double charge there, as expected, so these trolls are probably going to die, but that's a risk I'm willing to take because I think getting the next hit in could be quite a big deal there. And if you look at that situation there, I'm going to be able to get quite a few units into combat as long as nobody gets killed or wavered from shooting, which is possible because the boomers are in town. So what does this little boom block do? Well, they managed to put 8 damage on the unit of trolls that I've positioned on this side. So this is the unit with the Dwarven Ale. So I wasn't overly concerned about them. And they didn't even become wavered anyway, so it didn't matter. And you can see that the red goblin bigot is just moving about there. If you can hear any noise coming from outside my house, that's because the window is wide open, because otherwise I would actually melt at the microphone here. So look at all that damage done to the trolls, and of course they're dead. So these units turn, but the position they've left themselves in is a little bit awkward here. The Mincer is definitely going to have a flank charge on those Berserker Braves. So if they wanted to try to avoid the flank charge from the Mincer, I'm not sure whether they even could because of that Standard Bearer standing behind them. But even if they could have potentially opened themselves up to other charges as well. But I think it was too compacted for them to turn enough to get out of the flank charge of the Mincer. So I'm going to be able to at least double charge those Berserker Braves with a flank from the Mincer and hopefully kill them in one go. So let's see what I can accomplish next time. It's looking okay so far. Turn 3 for the Goblins, and look at this. So managed to get the Mincer in the flank, 2 troll units in the front, so I went for the triple charge to make absolutely sure, and that unit of berserkers there is well and truly dead, absolutely splattered, and the Mincer is just leaving itself parked in that position. I think it overran a bit just to get itself blocking in those warriors so they can't charge my trolls, who have then turned sideways to face the other incoming threat, and the trolls there in the middle at the bottom there are just leaving themselves facing forward so that when the Mincer inevitably is killed, they will be able to attack those warriors. Over here, my shooting battery of 2 sniff regiments, the diadem and the war trombone, they managed to waver the boomers. They only did mediocre damage, but a waver is good enough there. So it's looking very healthy for the goblins at the moment, but the ogres not to be sniffed at or underestimated here. So the warriors go into the Mincer as expected. The standard bearer charges the flank of the troll horde there, which I'm fine with. He doesn't have many attacks, because if you look at this scene here, if I'd left them facing forwards, the boomer sergeant would have had a flank charge on them, and he's got more attacks, so I was more concerned about that, whereas the standard bearer is not really a big concern to me. And you can see the bigot has also gone into the war trombone, so I would expect that to become wavered or die there. I've also got my flagget positioned so that he's between those 2 units, but he could well be scorched off by my opponent's boomer sergeant there, who's not wavered. And that's exactly what happens. The boomer sergeant takes out the flagget in 1 blast. The war trombone goes down to the bigot. The Mincer, of course, is minced to death with that flank charge, but he did his job. And the standard bearer actually manages to waver this unit of trolls, but they are the dwarven ale unit, so quietly confident that they'll still be able to have a say. And what they would like to do, if you look at this shot here, they would like to pass their dwarven ale roll, charge into the boomers, and finish them off, while my other trolls take care of the unit at the top there. So turn 4 for the goblins. My sniffs have positioned themselves so that they've got a nice shot at something, and they actually kill off the boomers. So that was very, very tasty nerve-rolling there, and you'll see why they had to do that, because these trolls failed their headstrong roll, so they weren't able to charge the boomers, so they're kind of stuck where they are. And the trolls that were waiting patiently behind the Mincer went into the ogre warriors and did a bit more damage on them, but couldn't roll enough to get rid of them. And that's how it's looking at the moment. So there are 4 units left per side by my reckoning here, but possibly crucially in the dominate scenario, the goblins have more unit strength left alive at this stage. Turn 4 for the ogres. So the red goblin bigot is steaming into those sniffs. The warriors are going back into the undamaged trolls, and these trolls that were already damaged and wavered are flank charged by the boomer sergeant and front charged by the standard bearer, so they could possibly die as a result of that. And the sniffs do actually go down to the bigot, so that's not very nice. These trolls don't suffer much damage though from the warriors, which is good, because the trolls will be able to kill them next turn now. But the other troll unit managed to die. Look at that, not much damage, but there's no inspiring left. There's only 1 source of inspiring in this list, which could be a potential issue. And moving on. So, if we look at the situation that's going on in the centre there, I've got a unit strength of 3, and my opponent, well, unit strength 3 with the trolls. I'm not sure the sniffs will survive the game, but they will be worth 1. My opponent has 3 in the form of his horde, which is certainly going to die, and then 2 single point characters there as well. On to the next shot, and you can see that the red goblin bigot down there, he's still in a position to affect the game because he is very fast, but he's the only thing presently on the table that cannot score. Okay, on to turn 5. So the trolls do manage to kill those ogre warriors, finish them off with some ease. The Sniffs decide to charge into the Boomer Sergeant just to prevent him shooting, because he is a big threat. He is something that could definitely take those trolls out with a lucky round of shooting, so decide to do a bit of damage on him with a charge. And even if I'd failed the yellow-bellied test, then I still would have been able to shoot him. And it's looking fairly healthy right now, I would say. If that troll horde can survive, they are the most valuable unit there in terms of unit strength. So if they don't die, then I'm going to win the game, because they are currently inside the zone. Unless they get nudged out of the zone with some positioning of opposing units. But that would take a couple of rounds of combat for them to do that, I think. So turn 5 for the Ogres, they decide to double charge the Sniffs with the Boomer Sergeant, countercharging them, and the Bigot charges them as well, and the Standard Bearer goes into the Troll Horde on his own. Not too concerned about that. So the Sniffs die, with only 2 damage on them. And there's how that looks. And look at this though. Wow, wow, wow. Not much damage done, but the trolls do become wavered. So a nice nerve roll, wavering the trolls there, which could be critical because it means I'm not going to be able to attack next turn. So it's still looking in my favour though. Okay, turn 6. And nothing happens because I've only got 1 unit left and they're wavered. So they're just sitting there regenerating wounds. Turn 6 for the Ogres. Now they choose not to try to gently nudge my unit of trolls out of the zone with time, because this is potentially the final turn and it would take possibly 2 turns for them to do that. So they decide to try and kill the unit instead, which is probably the better idea because the game just could end, and they've got a fair few attacks between those 3 units, so they could certainly get them up there, and there's no inspiring around. So it's a gamble, but we'll see if it pays off. So, no it doesn't, they only do 1 damage, but look at that, nerve roll of 9 by the looks of it there. They do manage to waver them again. So if there is another turn, then the Ogres are still in with a shot here. And there is, so if it just ended there, the Goblins would have won 3 unit strength points to 2, but we actually go on to another turn. So the Trolls, again they can't do anything, but they do regenerate, it looks like, do they? I know they don't regenerate any of their wounds by the looks of it there. So they just have to sit there. And turn 7 for the Ogres, so they have 1 more go to kill off these Trolls. Can they do it? Get them up to 7, but they can't defeat them. So the Trolls survive, and they are majority within 12 inches of the centre point, so it's going to be a win for the Goblins. Now, overall thoughts. There were a few really swingy moments there. It was looking really amazing for the Goblins at one point. But then it turned around a little bit, and the fact that the unit with the Dwarven Ale became wavered when they did wasn't healthy for them, but it didn't end up mattering too much because I was able to shoot down the boomers anyway. What really made it really close was this unit of trolls, the surviving unit, becoming wavered a couple of times from just small amounts of damage. And they were the final unit, so it was just a question of could they regenerate enough wounds and hold on against this onslaught of a medium amount of attacks for the rest of the game, and ultimately they did. As far as my list goes, I think, well, both the lists I think are pretty strong at this points level. They can both dish out some serious pain, and they're not the easiest to shift either. I do like this list. This is a practice game for a tournament that has escalating point levels. So the first 2 games are at 1,000 points, the next one is at 1,800, and the next one is at 2,500. So this is the smaller of my lists for that event. And looking at it, I don't see what I would really change. I do feel it lacks inspiring, it's only got the 1 source of it, but I don't know whether I would want to drop anything out to make way for more inspiring. The only thing I could possibly do for that would be ditch one of the Fleabag Rider Sniff troops and bring in possibly another Flaggit, maybe with the Holy Hand Grenade, except actually you can't do that because you can only have 1 of each hero, so it would have to be a different hero. So it could be a wizard with the Inspiring Talisman, or it could be a bigot. So, yes, it's a tricky one. Would I want to make that change given a chance to get more Inspiring in there? It's a tough one. On this small table size, you don't need a huge amount of Inspiring. The list I ran that was 1,250 points at a recent tournament was very similar to this, but I did have a Troll Bruiser in there as well, so the majority of my units had 2 Inspiring sources. So I think 1 is maybe pushing it a little bit. So I'll need a bit of luck, I think, with my opponent's nerve rolls if I'm going to do well with this list, with just that single Inspiring hero in there. Anyway, it's time to wrap this one up and move on to the next game. So tune into the next video and you'll see how I do in the practice game at 1,800 points, which is similar to this list, but with a few things added. Right. Look at that. There we go. Beautiful pink text for this video. And don't forget to check out all the links in the description. Various social media shenanigans going on there. Join the Facebook group, send me all your money, all that good stuff. Follow me on Twitter. And with that, all that remains to be said is, good night out there, whatever you are.